Hello, this is R Rats with Team 4545 League analyzing the game between JWB and Insan 996. This was played in Team Event 53 in the third round, 1600 section. At this point, I believe White's team is down 0-2 and needs a win. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, knight f3. And obviously when Black plays c5, he's prepared to defend a Sicilian defense if that's what White wants. Just want to remind everybody what you can get into when you transpose openings. And knight f3 is one of those openings that can just transpose into just about anything. Okay, c4, c5, we're in a symmetrical English. Anything can still happen. We can still go into a number of other lines, but it just depends on how the players continue. Okay, so here we're going to go into a we're in a symmetrical English. One thing Black could do, an interesting setup, is to play e6 and knight ge7 here. For the moment, Black is clamping down on d4, and White can't play that. And that's one of the moves that he wants to do. So by playing e6, then I say the idea is eventually knight ge7 and d5. This is a perfectly acceptable line for Black. He should equalize out of it no problem. White needs to try to prepare d4. He'll have to castle, play e3, and finally force d4 in. So by doing what Black did, he just allows White pretty much to get into the symmetrical English. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with d6, but nothing wrong at all. I'm not going to criticize it. I'm just saying there's some transpositional possibilities here. Like I say, e6, and then White will probably castle, and then knight ge7. And White still can't play d4 here because Black owns that square, so White has to stop and play e3. And then Black is ready to castle, and then he's planning d5. Well, White can go d4 now, and it might be one of those positions where White gets an isolated queen pawn here real easy. Okay, so pawn takes, and then Black plays d5, and this is the target, and Black's going to be piling up on that pawn here in a moment. So I just wanted to share just some off the wall lines, not really off the wall, just off the beaten track lines that are still considered main lines, and they have some plans, and objectively Black does okay out of this. White has resources, of course, but the burden is on White to know these resources. And when you're defending a position with Black, if you can know even if you don't play the opening, if you know the strategies behind them, you can hold those things in reserve and spring them at the appropriate time. Okay, so let's just go back to the main line, and there's nothing wrong with what Black played, but it's just going to lead to a main line position, and it's a little more comfortable for White to play than this line I just showed. Okay, so now White castles, and really, what's Black going to do other than play knight f6? He's managed to keep White from playing d4, and as I pointed in the other example, if White has to, he'll get d4 in. He needs to get d4 in. He'll get it in by way of having to stop with e3, but how else can Black logically stop this? Okay, he could play the knight to h6. That keeps the diagonal open, and White won't be able to play d4 right away, but there's all kinds of possibilities with knight h6. Another possible candidate move would be bishop e6, which might goad White into just playing d3 to secure that, and he'll abandon all hope of playing the freeing d4 against bishop e6. Though eventually you're going to run into a knight g5 problem, so Black may have to stop and play h6. But these are just candidate moves to consider, and going into mainline, I think in a way helps White, because we're now in a symmetrical English, a mainline position, and White actually has a great deal of freedom in this type of position that he doesn't have in the other lines. So d4, now, like I say, we're in a main line, and by transposition, what Black can do, and I've shown some videos with this already. There's one between Fledermaus played Black. I can't remember who had White, Poisson, I think. Or no, colors reversed. Fledermaus was white, Poisson was black, and it was pretty sure last round. And neither side knew exactly the strategies of the opening. I'll just show some of them here. What's totally okay for black to play here is knight takes, okay, and then queen takes, and then you just castle, and main line goes queen d1 or queen d3, and this is considered the basic mainline theory, and that's how I believe the game between Fledermaus and Poisson started, but neither side knew really the correct strategy. And black's fine here, white's fine too, and my own experience says that if black misplays this, though, that white's going to end up with an incredible game. A lot of people will go through the mistaken strategy of trying to set up a battery of the queen and bishop on this diagonal and exchange off that light squared bishop of white's, and all this does is just give white a tremendous position, because he'll set up pawns on the white squares, pawn to e4, pawn to f3, pawn to b3, and let the bishop be traded, and he'll have this killer bishop that just rakes the black position, and black will be at some point be playing a6, and all these black squares over on the queen side or get infested by white pieces, while black is busy trading off that bishop. White's conducting all kinds of operations, centralizing rooks on c1 and d1, and like I say, if black misplays this, he can get in a bad game real quick. And the theory basically says what black needs to do in this position is play a6 and then strive for a plan of knight d7 to c5 to attack the queen. Now that also guards the pawn on b7, and then you play bishop d7, rook b8, and eventually force b5 in. And that strategy will give black an equal game as long as he follows it. And that's not the only way to play this position, but in my opinion, it's the best way to play this position, because as black, you want to hold a draw at least, and especially in a team event, and that should suffice if black plays carefully to get him his draw. Okay, so anyway, black played the slightly slower bishop d7, and we don't normally reach this position in asymmetrical English, but anyway, it's just going to transpose kind of, but we're kind of off main line too. As I explained, usually black is taking on d4. Now, one good move that white missed in this position is, and I mentioned it in the other game, is just to swing the knight back to c2, knight d4 c2. The purpose of this is eventually white's going to play e4, and then the knight can redeploy to e3, and then white can get a nice knight posted on d5, and it'll sit there. And if black takes with his knight, white will replace that knight with another knight and invite e6, which gives black a backward pawn on the open file. So knight c2 is a fine maneuver here, something for white to keep in mind and for future lines. Okay, but he didn't play it, so I think e3 is just a little slow. It shuts in the bishop, and here's white with, I've mentioned this in so many videos, I'll say it again because I see it. There's the queen rook and queen bishop still at home. How long are they going to stay there? And in fact, white is giving odds of a rook and a bishop until he moves those. Okay, so black just continues his development and castles, and then this is fine, b3, because this is a good pawn structure to have against in asymmetrical English. And a6 is more or less thematic in this. Now the bishop gets developed, so that's good. And both sides just continue their development. Okay, now if now, for instance, rook a c8, development is complete. White just needs to move his queen, and we've got all the pieces out. So good. I like to see development. Okay, rook b8's fine. Preparing b5 at some point. We're not ready for it yet, but we will be. Okay, queen d2. Now e5 is just a fundamental error here because it weakens d6. Black has other resources here that are just as good. Okay, what black wants to do here? It's probably not a bad idea to just take on d4. It can still be done, and let's discuss why. Okay, if you take on d4, how's white going to retake? If he takes with the queen, there's some potential discoveries that might cause white some embarrassment. Now, I'm not saying they will, but white has to deal with those. Okay, for instance, the knight can go to g4, which under discovered attack on the queen, and now the queen has to find a square to go to, right? Okay, doesn't have any power. Oh wait, there is a move here. I missed. Queen takes. This is clever. Check. Oops. Okay, so knight g4 fails to a tactic. Isn't that interesting? How many saw that before I did? Give yourself credit if you did. I don't know what black does here. He cries. But then again, maybe his knight gets trapped. Okay, let's just play it out. King g8. Knight takes. Now how does the knight get out? Okay, white's a piece ahead, so he can, if he has to, oh, knight just gets out on d5. How dumb. Okay, so we gotta hold the knight back a little bit, but white has to be able to survive this. Okay, so ixnay on knight g4. So let's see, knight takes d4, queen takes d4. Well, we can play knight e8, but that just seems to get in the way. Probably nothing wrong in this position with just playing bishop c6. Ooh, then knight d5 comes in. That's kind of powerful. If we take with the bishop, we take back with the pawn, and the queen's loose. But then we've shut in this white bishop. I have a game example where black does this and can actually hold the position. It's kind of a long story. Basically, black's goal is to eventually trade the dark squared bishops and draw the game with the knight, and that pawn on d5 just gets in white's way. So black could survive this. I have a game that shows that this is possible. And now black will prepare knight h5. So let's go back just a little bit. The other choice is, see, after here, and he played e5. Okay, the other choice is to take. Now we said you can't play knight g4, but you can play knight h5. Okay, that's fine. Now the queen has to go somewhere, so d3 is a common square. Now let's just oppose the bishop, and if white takes, we'll take back with the queen and maintain our idea of eventually getting b5 in, and black should be okay here. Okay, I don't want to elaborate too much. It was just kind of a fascinating position. And since the game kind of turns here real quick, I think I had time for it. Okay, essentially e5 just weakens d6, and probably should have taken with the bishop, but just to clear d8 for a rook. But what can we say now? White's piling right up on that pawn, and black tries this, and actually I don't know if that's the best move. White has a good move here, but he tries to get too cute here. This is okay, but white had a better move. The better move is just bishop c3, which threatens to play bishop a5, and we still have pressure on d6, but I won't get into that. Something for white to look at. But knight d6, and then what white needs to do now is just give up the exchange, and he's got a great position. Bishop takes, rook takes, and even though white's down in exchange, he's just dominating this board. He's got full compensation for the sacrificed exchange. Black's pawns on a6 and c6 are weak. If black takes the knight, white's got this powerful passed pawn, and a new target on c6 is opening up. So white can give up the exchange here and actually have the better game, but I guess he didn't consider it possible. But in light of what happened, maybe he should have looked at it. But white was fine here, and that's what he should have done, is just played c5. But he makes a mistake, and he spent 2-3 minutes on the move, so he had time to see it. But that just hangs the knight on d6, and black's winning a piece for nothing. So I guess white just miscalculated and on the move, on the piece count or something, or thought that he had blundered the knight away. I don't know. I was unwilling to give up the rook. But now he's just got a lost game. He's down a piece with no compensation, and the final moves just run out. Now he's having to defend a pawn. Ouch! Maybe it'd been better to, I don't know, put the bishop on a1. Just keep the rook on the center file. But anyway, he just starts getting a bad game here real quick, and this just hurts. Now there's a pin to deal with, and now the game is over. Black's threatening E3 and C3, and White's game is just a disaster. But there were some chances in there. The exchange sack would have been good with C5, and both sides now see a few different strategies on how to handle this opening. And I want to thank everybody for their time, and we'll see you with the next game very soon. Take care.